Member Boyle, you're recognized for your opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, and to those who are also testifying. There's a lot of rhetoric around this bill and the whole issue regarding the debt ceiling and where we are on spending. So I think it's helpful perhaps to take a step back and recognize exactly where we are in terms of this economy. Right now, as the center-right Economist magazine recently observed, the United States by far is leading the economic recovery out of the pandemic. It is not even close. Unemployment is at a 54-year low. GDP growth greater than any other peer economy. We see manufacturing booming, real incomes rising, the gap between the richest Americans and poorest Americans shrinking, and even inflation, which has been a challenge for every economy on earth recovering from the pandemic, it has declined for 10 consecutive months and continues to do so. So maybe one of the best things that Congress can do this year is not get in the way or pass anything that would screw up that world-leading economic recovery. Unfortunately, just a month ago, the bill the House Republicans passed and that no Democrat voted for would have done exactly that. It would have ended this world-leading economic recovery. It would have led to 780,000 fewer jobs and a greater likelihood of a recession next year. Those aren't my words. That is the nonpartisan economic analysis from Moody's. I am very proud that despite the flaws in this bill, we are here with something that will not do that sort of damage to our economy. This bipartisan bill is not perfect. In fact, I've yet to meet one person who loves it. Perhaps that is a sign that it is a fair compromise between a narrowly Republican House and a narrowly Democratic Senate, and of course a Democratic White House. There are, however, things to celebrate in this bill because of what is not in it. The sort of damage that we saw from the Republican partisan bill that passed here just a month ago. This bipartisan budget agreement protects critical services for children and families. The agreement protects critical funding for education, health care, and housing, in contrast to the extreme MAGA Republicans' proposal, which was for 22% cuts and a decade of harmful budget cuts. It protects veterans' health care. One of the most important bills that we passed last session, a Democratic House and Senate with a Democratic president, was the PACT Act. Revolutionary in terms of funding the true health care needs for our veterans. This bill protects the gains of the PACT Act. This bipartisan budget bill protects Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. It protects the historic clean energy infrastructure investments, again, that were passed last term, the largest such investments to address climate change in our nation's history. It also protects the lifelines for vulnerable Americans. The agreement helps more veterans, people experiencing housing instability, and young people aging out of foster care access SNAP while avoiding the most devastating changes extreme MAGA Republicans sought to SNAP and to TANF. Again, this bill is not perfect. But we should take a moment and reflect how close we are to what would be the first ever default in American history. June 5th, we're less than a week away. We've raised the debt ceiling 103 times since 1940. The debt ceiling came in over a century ago during World War I. It was dramatically changed in 1939. So really from 40 on, we can make an apples-to-apples comparison. 103 times the debt ceiling has been raised. The vast majority of those, almost two-thirds, under Republican presidencies. And no, the debt ceiling was actually not created to force Congress to take a look at our spending and debt. Quite the opposite. Treasury created it to make it easier for our nation to pay our bills and avoid default. Something has been going on since the summer of 2011 that is quite dangerous. This has been the most dangerous moment since that summer of 2011, when our nation received its first ever credit downgrade. Fitch has already put us on notice that we may suffer a downgrade from that rating service as well. Last time we experienced such a downgrade, GAO found it increased our borrowing costs by billions. We may face that yet again. We may survive this time and not go over the cliff, and just within hours of the deadline, by the time this passes the Senate, avoid default. But if we keep tempting fate like this, we are, maybe sooner rather than later, going to default, which would be devastating. It would launch at least 8 million job losses, if not more. It would affect not just the US economy, but the global economy, and have ramifications that are actually hard to predict. We have to stop doing this. Threatening default on our nation's debt is not the way to drive a budget agreement. Frankly, if the X date was not falling June 5th, let's say the timing were different and that it were not for another year off, I suspect the budget agreement we would have reached this September would look a lot like what is in front of us today. So this whole exercise of the majority party holding our economy hostage was completely unnecessary and dangerous. We have to reform this debt ceiling process once and for all before it's too late. With that, I'll be happy to yield back.
Thank you for your statement. I have